The Mini3 Pro is one of the best-selling consumer drone ever, and for good reasons. I've been flying it for 3 months now, and I've tested every single aspect. After a series of firmware upgrades, a few small youth issues have been ironed out, and the Mini3 has entered maturity. In this video I will analyze if the Mini3 is worth its price, and what kind of user should buy it. With the Mini3, DJI has managed for the first time to squeeze 3-directional sensors in a sub 250 grams drone. Obstacle detection makes this model much safer in flight and allows tracking, even though I would not recommend using it for close distance action tracking, as it lacks sensors above and on the sides. There is definitely a blind spot when flying sideways or below obstacles. The only model in the DJI line that I would use for close distance tracking is the Mavic 3. The Mini3 is a powerhouse packed with features, practically the same as the R2S. The most useful in my opinion are the 3 intelligent flight modes grouped under the name Focus Track. They are Attic Track, Spotlight and Point of Interest. I've covered the 3 modes of Focus Track in dedicated videos, and I use them constantly for smooth cinematic moves and for tracking. A big new feature of the Mini3 is the ability to tilt the camera from the traditional landscape orientation to portrait, thus allowing to shoot vertical video and photos. It is the only model of the current DJI line offering this feature, and this can be a gigantic selling point for the Mini3, as the ideal drone for serious social media coverage. Other features include master shots, panorama photos and hyperlapses, all of which are very well implemented, and after a series of firmware updates, they can now also be used in vertical mode. The shape of the Mini3 is different from the previous Mini models, to squeeze in the obstacle sensors while remaining under the threshold of 250 grams. It is taller and wider, which match bigger propellers. There is no door for the battery enclosure to shave a few extra grams, and I find this useful as it is much faster to change batteries. The arms don't need to be open and closed in any specific order, quite handy again. But the main difference is in the gimbal. There is now plenty of room about the camera, allowing vertical orientation and also an extra upward tilt of 60 degrees, which is useful for unusual creative shots. To keep the weight down, this baby doesn't have an internal cooling fan. This also reduces power consumption and increases battery life. So the aircraft uses the wind generated by the propellers to dissipate the heat generated during flight. The downside is that when the drone is not flying, it does overheat quite quickly and will automatically switch off after a few minutes. So when you need to update the firmware, remember to keep the drone in the shade and to do it as quickly as possible. An excellent feature is the possibility to use the Mini3 with the new RC controller. I find this controller a joy to use. He has a built-in screen, so we don't need to carry a smartphone or a tablet and cables. Just press the start button and in a few seconds we are ready to go. I also find extremely useful the possibility to record the screen on a memory disk. The Mini3 can be purchased with a new RC controller at around €1,000, or with the traditional RC N1 at €840, and even without the controller at €750. This is obviously very handy for users who already own another DJI drone. First thing we notice when we put this baby up in the air is how low the noise level is. It is much quieter than any other DJI model, probably due in part to the large propellers. This is excellent to avoid unwanted attention from passerby while flying. The Mini3 responds very well to the controls and is very easy to take off and land even in confined spaces. The announced wheel resistance and horizontal speed are the same as the Mini2, but the Mini3 feels more powerful and agile. The descending speed is much faster, and this is very handy when changing elevation or returning home. The gimbal is excellent with the horizon always level, and thanks to the new design I have never experienced any jump of the camera when starting or ending a move. The battery lasts for around 30 minutes in normal conditions, which is more than the Air 2S and the Mini2. Outside of Europe it is also possible to purchase an extended battery lasting for more than 40 minutes, which makes the Mini3 an excellent tool for hyperlapse. The Mini3 has a much bigger sensor compared to the previous Mini models, at 0.77 inches. It can produce footage at a resolution of 4K at a frame rate of up to 60 frames per second. Another huge benefit compared to the Mini2 is the presence of the flat profile D-Cine-like, besides the oven-ready one, normal. These video specs put the Mini3 in a totally different league from the Mini2, actually closer to the excellent Air 2S. Normal mode is very good, and this is very important, as the main target for this model is users who are seriously active on social media platforms, due to the ability to shoot video in vertical format. These users often don't rely on computer post-processing. The footage is usable right out of the sensor, but to make it shine, some basic color grading is needed. With most drones or camera, I normally set the white balance at around 5600 Kelvin. But at this value, the Mini3 has a yellow-brownish tint that is not easy to correct in color grading. I find that much better results are obtained by setting the white balance at around 5000 Kelvin. D-Cine-like is a flat profile meant for serious post-processing. It is very important for professional use, as the footage can be adapted to the color scheme of any specific project. In the first iteration of the Mini3, D-Cine-like was an 8-bit mode, but after a firmware update it was adapted to a sort of 10-bit mode, with a color space of about 1 billion colors. At first I was not impressed by the quality of D-Cine-like due to dark shadows and some color banding in uniform parts of a scene. But after a series of updates, it has improved a lot, and it is progressively looking more and more like a solid 10-bit mode. Photos with the Mini3 Pro are excellent, and they've been so from the first version of the software. The images are well balanced and organic, and the colors are very pleasant. The files respond very well to post-processing. It is not a beast of detail, especially in the element far away, but this is not necessarily a bad point, as some users might find the images more natural. The very slight lack of detail could be due to the very wide aperture of the lens. There is also a so-called 48 megapixel mode, which has a tiny bit of extra detail in easy light conditions. But it falls completely apart in situations of high dynamic range, where the shadows are just a big blob of chromatic noise. Also, these 48 megapixels are huge, and put a big strain on the computer if used on a video project. Due to the extra wide aperture of the lens, a set of ND filter is needed more than in other models. In the description you will find a link to the one I use. DJI has always been very good at marketing, and the models in its lineup are always very well positioned for fitting different segments of users, avoiding unwanted competition between models. The Mini3 is a very powerful model with a huge array of functionalities. It does plenty of things, and most of them very well. It has the big bonus of a weight below 250 grams for extreme portability, and more relaxed regulation in many countries. It is a huge update compared to the previous mini models of the brand, and in my opinion certainly worth the difference in price compared to the Mini 2 for serious users who can afford it. Due to the ability to shoot vertical video, it is the model to choose for people seriously active on social media. It can also be very interesting as a second drone for professional users who also own a Mavic 3 and would use the Mini for urban shooting, hiking trips, or social media content. For obvious reason, I would not recommend it to people living in areas with extreme wind conditions. Before the release of the Mini 3, I thought that the new model might spell the end of the excellent R2S. The sensor of the Mini 3 is not too far in size, and technology has moved extremely fast since the release of the R2S. So, I was thinking that the Mini 3 could reach a similar quality in video and photos. But this is not the case. The quality of the camera of the Mini 3 is good, but the R2S is still superior, both in video and in photo. I still recommend the R2S to users who are very serious about the quality of footage and photos, are not heavily involved in vertical video content for social media, don't do a lot of urban shooting, or live in very windy areas.